Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, the Doctor is In series. This is episode 225. I'm Chris Hanegi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since way back in 2009, way before Abbie was even alive. That's not true at all. No, she's not that young.
Why did I not?
Why did you not? I don't know. Maybe you thought, I am only 13 years old. That would be even more amazing. She'd like that real life Doogie Howser. But as you already know, the Doctor is In series, we need a doctor to call it the Doctor is In series. So our resident genius, Dr. Abbie, thanks for being with me on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'm Dr. Abbie Maroño. I'm a behavioral scientist and I have a PhD in psychology and behavioral analysis. I'm an expert in nonverbal communication, social processes, and trust.
Awesome. And you got your PhD right.
I did. Oh, and I'm the director of education at Social Engineer.
Wow. Thanks. That hurt. That hurt a little bit.
Oh, yeah. And my actual job. Yeah.
Yeah. And my actual job, Well, we're happy to have you here, of course. Couple quick announcements before we start the episode. If you're looking for social engineering services for your company, you definitely want to check out our website, social-engineer.com. Right now, I think it's not going to be new news to anyone. Everything is getting hacked nonstop. And it seems like vishing has been one of the more newer threats that we're seeing and has increased over 300% just in the last 12 months. You can find out more information about that in our State of Vishing report. But if you're wondering how to protect your company and your people and your assets from the threat of vishing or phishing or other social engineering vectors, go check out our website and you can see what services we offer and how we can help your company stay safe. An exciting announcement next month, if you're listening to this podcast, next month we have our first public edition of the master's level social engineering course. It's a 5-day full-on red teaming course where you get to do everything. You get to do phishing, vishing, physical break-in of a building, both daytime and nighttime. It's going to be a lot of fun. And this is the first year ever in 7 years that we opened it up to the public. Usually it's only been invite only from previous students, but we thought we'd give it a try since we had a lot of requests to have it open to the public. So if you're interested, October 23 through 27 in sunny Orlando, we will have that course. You can find out more information on the cost and where it is and all the details about it on our website under the training menu. If you love the topic of social engineering, then you definitely want to be in our Slack channel. I think we're up to 1,500 or 1,600 people now in there every day talking about all aspects of SE, all different types of the psychology of social engineering, influence principles, everything to do with it, even practicing their pretext and getting advice. We have a job board in there too, where we had over 10 people now find employment, looking for people looking to hire and those looking to get hired. So why don't you come on in? If you can't find the link in the show notes, just hit up Abbie or I on LinkedIn. We'll be more than happy to share that with you. I want to take a moment to invite everyone to go check out innocentlivesfoundation.org. We have a couple really exciting things over there, but if you're not familiar with the mission, this is the first time you've been hearing us talk about it. The Innocent Lives Foundation's mission is to help law enforcement geolocate and track down people who traffic children and create child abuse material. And both Abbie and I are volunteers for that organization. As a matter of fact, you can go check out her brand new column there, talking about some of the psychology and how people can deal with the trauma and other aspects of things that go on if you've been a survivor of one of these horrible things. But our mission has now been about 6 years, and we're up to almost just under 500 cases that we've fortunately been able to work with law enforcement and helping stop crimes against children. I'm really proud of the team over there. So you can support us by volunteering your time or donating money. And if you want to hang out with us, you can come out to the gala September 23rd in LA. We're going to have a host of LeVar Burton. I'm really excited about getting to hang out with him. So if you want to find out more information, you can go to innocentlivesfoundation.org/gala. And one other announcement, the music, if you like it, if you're really digging it, then it is none other than Clutch. Go check them out at pro-rock.com. Give them some love, some thumbs up, some likes. See them in concert. They're an amazing band, an amazing group of guys. Really family oriented, and they love the ILF. So give them some love out there too. And last but not least, if you have any ideas for future shows or you have comments, questions, things that we can do better, improvement points, please leave them in the comments, especially if you're on YouTube watching this. We do answer all of them. If you like what you hear, give us a thumbs up or a like. That helps our show continue to grow. We really appreciate all the kind words and the things that have been said about our show so far. Okay, I think that's all the housekeeping we have. So, Dr. Abbie, give us the topic for today that you have chosen.
Today, this one was actually requested.
Oh, nice.
So today we are talking about con artists. We're going to talk about the psychology of con artists, and we're going to go a little bit later into why people fall for them.
That's great. Now, you know what? I love the fact that this was an audience request, and now we're doing it because, see, we don't just say it, we live up to the promise.
We do.
Okay, this is going to be a great topic because, when I first, very in the beginning, when I wrote the original framework for social engineering, the first topic in that framework is con artists. And they were the people who I started to look at and study to kind of develop what I thought would be a beginning framework, because I thought con artists are the quintessential, I guess the wrong word. They're like the perfect example, even though so malicious and bad, of social engineering. What was that? Prototype. That's good. Yeah, that's a better word, and I can pronounce it. And I can spell it. Should never try to say words I can't spell. Prototype. P-R-O-type.
You won this year's spelling bee.
No, I didn't, because I just said prototype. I didn't say proto. I left out okay. Anyway, obviously, I'm not good at math or spelling, so this is why we have the doctor here to make sure that we sound semi-intelligent. Okay, so first question. What motivates a con artist?
Okay, so that is the big question, really. What motivates a con artist? Because when we think about someone doing these awful things, well, let's define a con artist first, maybe. So someone who cheats, tricks, or persuades others into doing something, knowing that it's not true. So if you get someone to do something because you think the outcome is an honest outcome, that doesn't make you a con artist. That just, makes you necessarily gullible. So to be a con artist, you have to be purposefully manipulating, purposefully tricking somebody. And what motivates a person? Well, it's a combination of an individual's personality, as well as psychological factors like mental health, psychopathology, as well as the situation they are in. These things will all interact to influence the action that they decide to take. A simple explanation that people tend to go to is, a con artist is someone who is greedy and dishonest. Well, that's a bit overly simplistic, because lots of people are greedy and dishonest, but they're still law-abiding, because a con artist is not law-abiding. And that's a really important thing. To be an actual con artist, you are doing something that is not legal. You are convincing someone to take an action that's not in their best interest, but it is illegal, what you are doing. And again, not all dishonest people commit fraud.
I love that differentiation that you brought up, because sometimes you hear that term, like being a con artist, tossed around like almost jokingly. But I love the fact that you really made it clear. Like, you have to be willing to break the law. And you're right. There's a lot of dishonest, greedy people out there, but they're not all conning you. They may have bad intentions, but that's not their motive.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good way to separate social engineer, professional social engineer, from con artist. Yeah. Because there is some confusion over where they overlap, just like there is with the dark triad personalities, which we will talk a little bit about. People don't necessarily know where they interact, where they overlap, where they're separate. And it's really important to define that separation, because a professional social engineer, or just a social engineer doing it for malice, a lot of the stuff they do necessarily isn't illegal. It's just convincing someone to do something that isn't in their best interest. But a con artist, it is illegal behavior.
So I have a question, because this is something interesting when it comes to social engineering. Would you say that research that you have read shows that a sociopath would be a really good con artist because they just lack that caring or feeling for other people?
Yes and no. So sociopaths would, but sociopaths and psychopaths are slightly different. A psychopath doesn't have the ability to have empathy, whereas a sociopath can. A sociopath isn't biologically stuck that way. They can be created that way. So someone who's had a lot of trauma and has kind of been pushed in that direction, you would probably consider a sociopath. Whereas someone who is born that way, who has biological abnormalities, that's a psychopath. You don't see that in sociopaths. So I would say that a psychopath would make, and has been shown to make, a very good con artist. And this is because of the lack of the empathy. And there was a study done by the famous Dr. Robert Hare, who is known for developing the Hare psychopathy checklist, which is used to assess psychopathy. We also have to remember that psychopathy isn't in the DSM. So it's not actually a clinical diagnosis, but it is considered in the literature very supported. So comparing white-collar criminals to non-criminal individuals, white-collar criminals were more likely to be psychopathic, which makes sense because of that lack of remorse and lack of empathy associated with con artist behavior. And what we're talking about here is, and it's really important to make this differentiation too, we're talking here about person-to-person deception, not online cons. We'll talk about that later, but it's really important when we talk about the psychology of it to separate the two, because the psychology is so different. To be in person and con someone, it's utterly ruthless. To look in someone's face, have a lack of affection and empathy and remorse, and generally a lack of conscience, is so different than online, because there's a lot of buffers that occur online that make us almost dehumanize the other person. So the psychology involved in doing it is slightly different. So we will talk about that later, but in relation to psychopathy, we're talking here in terms of person to person.
Because I've always said, when asked on interviews, like, what quality do I think makes a great professional social engineer? I always said empathy. Because I think that, if you want to not be the bad guy, then you have to realize that, yes, I'm about to trick this person. I'm about to do something that may make them feel bad at the end or make them do something they shouldn't do. But I need to have empathy for that person so I don't laugh at them like they're just some useless target, right? And that's why I was asking that question. If that, that lack of empathy would seem to make you a very high caliber con artist, because then you can do what you just said. You could see the old person or the woman who just lost her husband and still take her money, still do something bad to them.
Absolutely. Empathy deficits is probably one of the most supported factors in con artist psychology. Whether they're psychopaths, and we also see antisocial personality disorder in con artists. So we see this pervasive pattern of disregard and violation of other people's rights and of their boundaries, and basically this lack of social conscience and conventional morality. And this is associated with psychopathy, antisocial personality disorder, because these personalities do frequently deceive and exploit and manipulate others to achieve personal gain. They show patterns of impulsivity across their life, like risk-taking, thrill-seeking, gambling, and those things make a great con artist. And they show no genuine remorse. So this empathy deficit makes it fantastic to deceive others. And that psychopathy, whether it's personality disorder or actual psychopathy and being a psychopath, they're great concoctions to be a con artist. As a professional social engineer, they are the worst, because you could never actually engage in this empathetic behavior, because you'd have to almost fake empathy, and it just wouldn't work. Yeah,
that's an interesting. That's a good differentiation, because of saying, like, if you want to do this for a living on the good side, on the white hat side, then you definitely need to not be bragging that you're a sociopath or that you're great at conning people. That doesn't go good on the resume to come work here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably unsurprising that a characteristic like narcissism is also really good for a con artist. And research has consistently shown that individuals who engage in fraud and manipulation show higher levels of narcissistic traits. This narcissism can fuel the need for admiration and superiority. And what gives you superiority more than making another person feel tiny and taking things that you want from that person for personal gain?
Yeah, you think about some of those really personal cons. Like when I was doing the research for the what was it for the framework? One of the con artists that I really started reading about, because his story was fascinating, was Victor Lustwig. And he was famous because he sold the Eiffel Tower many times. And what he would do is he would be in a bar with one of his, buddies. He would loudly but quietly talk about how he had this amazing deal, because he was going to make millions of dollars on this massive metal sale, right? And somebody would be overhearing, and it was always a mark. And the mark he chose would be some very wealthy person. And he would sit like enough that it was like if you were there, you're talking like this, but you could hear. And then, of course, the guy would leave, and then the mark would come up to Victor, and he'd be like, "Hey, what are you talking about? I want." He's like, "Oh no, I can't even tell you about it. I'm sorry. It's too big. It's just too big, and it can't get out there." And the guy would beg him. Eventually, he would, break and say, "Well, look, I got some inside news that the Eiffel Tower is getting dismantled because of rust. That metal is worth millions of dollars, and I happen to know that I'm going to make an investment on that ahead of time, and I'm just going to, rake in the money." This guy would be throwing money at Victor. And of course, then he would just disappear. He also successfully conned $5,000 out of Al Capone and lived to tell the story. When he got arrested, there's pictures of the FBI agents with him, and they're all smiling and laughing and like patting him on the back like he was their buddy. He escaped prison because he stole a window squeegee, and acted like a window cleaner and used his bed sheets to hang out of the window and lowered himself, acted like he was cleaning the window, and escaped prison. Like this guy, it was a fascinating story. And yet, like when you think about what he did, he took millions of dollars from innocent people. Like, and they, their lives were ruined, and he never had to pay it back.
That's a really interesting point, because it sounds like that individual had higher emotional intelligence. And there is this back and forth in the literature between people who are Machiavellian and people who are narcissistic. And there's a suggestion that people that are narcissistic make really good con artists because they're very for themselves and out for themselves. But narcissism has this warped view of the world. So we don't have high emotional intelligence because we have this inflated self-ego and self-perception. So we interact with the world in this warped way to make ourselves feel better about ourselves and assume that everybody puts us on this pedestal that we put ourselves on. Whereas people who are Machiavellian have very high emotional intelligence. They don't have this warped sense of overinflated ego. They see the world very clearly. They see other people's emotions very clearly, which makes them much better at manipulating. But the consistency across narcissism and this is that there's a lack of empathy. But this individual that you just described is more likely a Machiavellian personality rather than a narcissistic personality, because the view is not warped. But it does bring up a really good point of this back and forth, that some people suggest that narcissism is better, some people suggest that it's not. So there's a bit of debate in the literature, but people who are narcissistic have that low emotional intelligence, which is that warped perception, which personally I think that someone who is narcissistic wouldn't make as good of a con artist as someone who has high emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, having dealt with some narcissists in my life, I think right away when you were saying that, I was going to, somebody I knew very high on a narcissistic scale. And you would say, like, I don't really understand that. Can you explain that to me? And the answer would be, how do you not understand that? What are you, a moron?
Yep.
Right. It was almost like if you didn't understand something, how dumb are you? Like, that's
the thing. When you're dealing with a narcissist, you're dealing with a narcissist.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
They can manipulate, but it only lasts so long because that personality is warped.
Yeah.
They don't register your emotions. So it makes you feel bad. It makes you feel uncomfortable, Whereas someone who is a Machiavellian, they're very good at knowing how you feel. And they're very good at manipulating their behavior and your behavior in a way that makes you feel good, makes you feel like you want to do the thing that they want you to do.
And that makes a lot of sense, because, when I think about the con artists that I read about, many of them, people liked them when they met them, right? And I can't think of a narcissist that I go, man, that was a fun conversation. I really enjoyed that. Usually I'm like, I cannot wait to be done with this. It felt
great to be belittled.
Yes, I love that feeling. That I love when I get told how dumb I am. That's my favorite part of my day. But yet with someone who's Machiavellian, you leave that. Sometimes you can feel like, wow, why do I like them? I just felt like I got totally manipulated, but I really like that person.
Yeah. I guess it depends on the con itself. Because for some cons, maybe being that, cutthroat, brutal, narcissistic trait, that would be more successful. Yeah. But if it does involve long-term relationships, someone who is Machiavellian might be a bit more successful.
And this kind of reminds me of a story too, that when we were working on, I know you're going to get into the cybercrime, so I'm going to tell this story real quick. This poor woman, her husband had passed, and she put some pictures on Facebook about things that they did. And, when they were alive, 40 years of marriage, some guy pings her and just says, hey, I see, you don't know me, but I see your husband died. And my wife died of cancer 7 years ago. I just want you to know it gets easier. I'll be praying for you. And they just started this conversation that turned quickly into a relationship, that quickly turned into, she believed like she was in love. And this guy, got her, I want to come visit you, but I have to save money. I'm from, this poor country in Eastern Europe. So as soon as I get money, I'm going to come visit you. I'm going to pay for your trip. Then there was visa issues. There was a plane ticket was too much. Everything kept happening. And at the point that the police got involved, and the federal police actually were telling her, like, this is a scam, she was like, no, you're just trying to stop me from being in love. Yeah. And she was convinced that her family, her kids got involved, and all these other family, they were just trying to stop her from being with her one true love, even though there was they had printed evidence, like, look, this guy's doing this to other women. He's a scam artist. And she didn't want to believe it. And I thought, wow, what an awful place to, that person, that is to me, such an awful con artist, because he had done such a good job that even presented with evidence, her brain did not want to break that commitment and consistency and say, no, I was duped. She wanted to believe that everyone else in the world was out to get her.
Yeah. And that's the thing, they're so good. When you have a good con artist, it's really confronting for the average healthy person to think, how on earth could anybody do that? Because we think, how could somebody look at themselves in the mirror? Yeah. And what's even more shocking is not everybody that is a con artist that does that has psychopathology. Because what we've talked about now is psychopathology, it's disorders. Whereas there are other reasons to do with psychology that aren't psychopathology. For example, ego and power. We talked a little bit about feeling this power and superiority, but just ego and power, they're not psychopathological, but they drive us. And someone can be of, clear mental health and still be a con artist. And I think that is really confronting, how we think they've got to be a psychopath, they've got to be a narcissist. Well, not always. Sometimes it can be driven by pure need to survive. If I need to feed my kids, they can't eat, and I have no way else to do it. Yeah. So it's situational, it's environmental. If I don't have kids, so I can't relate, but if my cats needed to be fed, I would do anything I could to get them food. You do what you have to do. Yeah. And for some people, they see the only way out is to con, is to, rob a bank or rob a jewelry store. And you see that pure desperation that we can associate and that we can almost understand, even if we don't agree with it. But for some people, it can be motivated by this ego and power. Maybe the original motivation was this desperation or greed or, threat that they needed to obtain something for survival, but it can be maintained by that felt really good. Yeah. That gave me a sense of power. It really fueled my ego and my feelings of superiority, which when I was down in the dirt, I didn't have. I felt tiny and small. And now I feel big and important.
I think this is an important point as a practitioner to keep in mind, because
yes,
we break into a building and it feels great. I mean, you have exhilarating, all your adrenaline, dopamine, everything's there. You feel awesome. You feel like $1 million, and like nothing can stop you. This last job we were talking about, we're jumping over barbed wire fences. We're running around places in the middle of the night. You feel like, I shouldn't be able to do this. And it's awesome.
Yeah.
But still at that moment, it's like, if the adrenaline's there, the good feelings are there, but we try to make sure that we always talk to the team. Like we still have to not view our clients or the targets as just that, as just viewing them as targets. Like, you're just here for my disposal so I can feel good about doing my job. We have to keep in mind the purpose. Why are we doing this? At the end of the day, I need to help you get more secure. So next time I come, you actually stop me and catch me. I want to help you be more secure so someone doesn't do this to you in real life and actually cause you harm, damage, or death. So I think, even though the good feelings are there, like you said, exhilaration from doing the job, it's important for a practitioner to keep in mind that the motivation has to always stay on that positive side, or you can easily, I think, go to the dark side and find joy in conning people.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. So I was speaking about this, I think with Joe Navarro recently. We were talking about this InfoSec mindset and hacker mindset of, they go into this field where they have a lot of power because they have a lot of power over information.
Yeah.
And as we know, information is power. And a lot of the time it attracts people who are very introverted. So they do keep to themselves and they are very isolated. And now they go out to, I can have all of your data. I can hack you. I can have anything I want. I can get anything from you. I can get your money. I can get your information. I can get everything that I need. How powerful does that feel? And that does attract a certain kind of person. And it can attract people that want to help and love security. I'm in this field because I love security. I love psychology, just like you guys are. But people slip in that they're attracted because they love that sense of power.
Yeah.
And that it's a very easy route down to darkness.
Yeah, I've met people like that in the industry.
Yeah.
I've met people like that.
Yeah, I mean, even in the field of forensics in general, I used to do a lot of work in serial killers, and I've got all these weird papers in like really dark fields that really scares people. And I did it because I wanted to understand so we can help. But I found myself, I would go through these cases of like these gruesome murders and everything was just a data point, and you kind of disassociate with it. And I found myself not treating cases like people, just like data points. And I didn't like that feeling. So that's why I moved more into the positive side of security, because I felt myself going, not down the dark route of I'm going to go and hack people and do these bad things, but this dark route of I am dehumanizing these cases and I don't like how that feels. Yeah. And it's very easy to do when you feel like you are getting a lot of power, especially in InfoSec.
Yeah, I remember when Neil Fallon was part of the board in ILF, we were having our one board meeting, and I was going, with the board meetings, we kind of go over what's been happening, recent cases, things we can talk about. And Neil stopped me at one point and he's like, listen, I just need you to talk about these kids like they're kids. You're talking about them like they're numbers. And he's like, I sat back and started to think, I am. Like I didn't hear myself doing it. Yeah. And I don't know if I don't believe that I did it because of ego or power. I think I did it because I started to say, I don't want to think of them that way because it hurts too much. So I just made them a number, but then when I was telling someone who wasn't deep into the work about this, and they felt, oh no, I can't hear about children like this. You're talking to me like they're just another page on a book. Yeah. And it was a good lesson, and I tie that back into our job, is that we can't ever get to the point where we're looking at someone who maybe we've tested them 4 or 5 times and they failed every time. And we're just, they're too stupid. They're just too stupid to be here. Yeah. Like that we have to, I understand at some point there may be a threat to your company and that person can no longer be employed. I get that. But still, even when you're saying, hey, you've posed a threat, the way we treat that person, can make all the difference in the world in how they feel. as they move on through the rest of their life, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point of these are people.
Yeah.
And the moment for me was, you know, when we talk about these things, we talk about this psychopathology and we're like, oh yeah, just a narcissist. Oh yeah, someone with mental health issues. I was talking like that to my family about one of these cases. And I was like, oh, of course they're schizophrenic. Now, a very close member of our family was schizophrenic. And when I said that, I saw the devastation on a family member's face. When I said, oh, of course, you know, they've got schizophrenia, it makes sense. And then it was real for me of, I've been around this. I've been around this kind of mental health. And from the inside, it is very traumatic and it is very difficult. And this person is struggling, but you love them and they are a good, kind person with a warped reality. And then you step back and you think, God, you know, what we're talking about here, acting like data points, acting like just bits of information. Oh, they did another con. Oh, they did this. That's somebody's life. That's somebody's real life. They're not data points. They are real people. And we'll talk quickly about cybercrime because that's the mentality. It's fraud at a distance. And this is why I really wanted to split up the in-person to cybercrime, because the psychology of it is so different. When you are dealing with data points, and whether you are talking about it like we are, of the psychology of it, or you are actually the person committing the crime, the person on the other end is not a real person to you. They are just a data point. And it makes it so easy to dehumanize them. And you don't need that same degree of callousness. You don't need to be, you know, awful and ruthless to do that, because you don't see them as a real person. You don't see their life. You don't see their sadness. You're not actually tricking them to their face. You're behind this buffer, especially in like email communications. How much easier it is to send an email and embed a link than it is to go up to a person and lie to their face. So much easier. You don't see the sadness. You don't see the response. You don't even see the person. You don't know anything about them. So that predatory nature of it, although it still exists, it's much smaller and it's much more subdued in things like cybercrime.
But I would also argue that certain cons, like right now, one of the things we're looking into is something called sexploitation, right? And it's a massive problem. These con groups, I was just speaking with someone from the Department of Homeland Security, and they were saying that they opened up a whole division to handle cases that are coming out of the Ivory Coast, right? So in Africa. And one day they had 4,000 cases. And these groups, they set them up. All they do is they get young guys and girls, so it's not just limited to young women, to send nude pictures. And then they tell them they're going to post them on the internet if they don't take money from their parents or their credit cards and give it to them. And it will be small amounts, like $50 maybe every couple of days, $100 every couple of days, but it will never end. And I sadly was just reading an article. This young 17-year-old boy killed himself because of this. And he couldn't deal with it. Even though, you know, they're not personally interacting, that level of evil, you know, that level of just awful evil to take someone's humiliation and shame and then use it for financial gain. And it's groups. We're not talking now. It's not like an individual, right? They set up groups and they do exactly what you described. They view them as a data point. They stop viewing them as children or as people that are going to be hurt and damaged for the rest of their life and maybe even commit suicide. But they view them as just this data point. You're my paycheck. And to get it, I need to do these things to you. It's horrific when you look at that kind of a con artist.
Yeah, I think when it comes to anything that's like humiliating, and particularly when it's sexual, it's slightly different, and it does verge more towards that you need kind of psychopathy to engage in that behavior. Whereas if I'm going to fraud you out of money and I'm going to do it like click this link to get a bonus, well, that I can do without, you know, I don't feel bad, just a data point. When you head into that, I'm going to purposefully humiliate you. Instead of, you know, the goal is humiliation to get money rather than just to get money. That's slightly different, but it's dehumanization and it's depersonalization. This isn't a person's private photo. it's just a private photo. It's not even a private photo. It's just a photo I need to obtain.
Yeah.
Doing that in person, very different. But it makes it easier when it's cybercrime, for these personalities. And it's horrible, but it does attract groups, and it's called groupthink. Everybody gets together and they share this mentality, and then it goes from, we'll get, these pictures, or we'll get these slightly worse pictures, or we're going to threaten, or we're now going to do this. And it escalates and escalates because of this group behavior. And it is horrific. And you have to remember, from the other side of it, from the victim side, whether it's in person or it's online, it feels the same.
Yeah.
It might not be the same to the attacker, but it feels the same, whether it's in person or online.
So, let's change it up. Why do people fall for these? Like, as we're talking about it, and I could understand it, but as we're talking about it, some of these sound so easy to spot. So why do people fall for them?
There's a lot of psychological and cognitive reasons, as well as motivational. Most of the time, we train professional social engineers, appear trustworthy, appear like you have authority. Well, those two things are really powerful. And as a professional social engineer, utilize them fantastic, because they're great teaching points. But as a con artist, we are geared towards trusting people. We are way too trusting. And we have always had hierarchies. That's how we function. Every society, to some degree, has a hierarchy. We thrive on authority. If we didn't have it, society would go crazy. We need a hierarchy to some degree. So we respect authority. So we trust people. So we are inclined to trust people. And professional social engineers utilize that for training and teaching. Con artists use that human nature to make you engage in really negative behavior.
So this is a hard one, because, like we're programmed, we're hardwired to basically want, when we trust you, I'm going to like you. But now we're saying that's going to be that's going to be exploited. So
and it's visceral triggers as well. So scams exploit basic human needs. We talked about, why do I engage in a scam? Because of fear and greed, and I need it for my situation. But also, we fall for them because of those reasons. So if a con artist wants you to engage in a behavior, they're going to make you feel like you need to engage in that behavior, whether it's, the desire to be liked, or the desire to avoid physical pain or psychological pain. If you don't do this, your kids won't eat. If you don't do this, you're going to suffer. Someone you love is going to suffer. Something you love is going to suffer. You're going to do it. Yeah. So there can be those real visceral triggers, as well as that I trust you, I believe in you. So there's those two sides. And then there's obviously things like, cognitive reasons. Some people aren't very good at assessing a situation. Some people don't engage in critical thinking. And there is a relation between low education and lack of intelligence and falling for these scams. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that everybody that falls for it is an idiot, or, lacks intelligence or isn't educated. It just means that individuals that do have a lower IQ and do lack intelligence, they are more likely to, because they're less likely to assess a situation and engage in critical thinking. So who do you think con artists are going to go for? Well, they're going to go for people like the elderly, who naturally have a cognitive decline. They're going to go for people that they know aren't going to engage in critical thinking, because they make great targets.
So what's the fix? How do we, like, as we end this, how do we tell people to stay safe and protected? What's the word?
It's so tough, because some of these are so real. They're so good and so well prepared. But I think we always say, if you get an email, you get a phone call, you get someone tell you to do something, and you feel a strong emotional response, negative or positive, breathe, give it a second, because the brain is going to first process through the amygdala, and then it's going to go through the prefrontal cortex. Critical thinking occurs in the prefrontal cortex. You need to give it a second. You need to breathe. If you feel that strong emotion, don't act. Just like I was speaking to my dad yesterday, because he called me up like he always does when he's annoyed about something, to vent and get me to tell him how to respond. And he was like, I'm going to send this email. And I said, Dad, don't send this email. Just whatever you do, send me the email first. Send it to me. Tell me what you're going to say. And he called me up this morning and was like, I didn't send the email. I breathed. I came back to it and I changed the email up and I sent a better one. And it's like, because he gave himself a second to breathe.
Yeah.
Never send that email when you want to send it. Give yourself a second. It can wait, because you've got to let the emotion simmer, engage in critical thinking, and then you're going to act more rationally.
That never worked for me. So I came up with a new solution for me, right?
Okay.
Maybe other people listening will enjoy this. Because what I would do is I would want to send the email, and then I would get up and say, well, I need to breathe. I'll go walk away. But what I'm doing when I walk away, I'm thinking about that email. That's all I'm doing. And I'm getting myself angrier and angrier. So then I come back and I'm like, well, I gave myself time and I'm still pissed, bam. And then I send it and go, crap, right? So here's my solution. I write the email with one promise. I do not click send, right? So that's my promise to myself. That's my script. But I write the email. Then I get up and walk away, because now I'm not thinking, because it's all out. Yeah. It's out of my head and my heart onto paper. So now I go and get my coffee or whatever. I come back and I read it to myself. And as I'm reading it, I'm going, oh my God, that's so bad.
Yeah.
I changed this. And then because exactly what, I came up with that off of Dr. Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, because when he talked about amygdala hijacking, he said he found that to get those students back to that critical thinking, they needed 30 seconds of neutral emotion, like up to 30 seconds of neutral emotion downtime, with none of that other, like no fear emotion, nothing else, just to return to critical thinking. And I'm like, that's why I'm not, because I didn't have a neutral emotion. That 1 minute I walked away was still anger, was still whatever. But when I got it out, then I can walk away, neutral emotion for a couple minutes. I came back and now my frontal cortex is back thinking. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I feel better. So I think that advice is good from what you're saying, right? Like like if you're sitting there and you get this email or you get a whatever, something that, and you feel a very strong emotion, that's a great time that before you react to say, let me sanity check this. Let me proof check that. Right? I mean, really, why not? Right?
That's a great way to put it. And another great way to think about it is, well, what if someone you loved opened the email? Imagine that it was sent to someone you love. Would you be happy with someone speaking to them that way? And I think about it like, if I'm going to say, Chris, say you've annoyed me. And I'm like, right, I'm going to send my boss an email. If that was my dad that opened that email, would I feel okay with the person who sent that? Yeah. And you've got to think, well, if I wouldn't want my dad or my sister or my brother or someone I love to open that email and be spoken to that way, I shouldn't speak to whoever I'm sending it to that way. Yeah. And I think for me, that one resonates. And I always just think about, how would my dad feel if he read that? Because if I am sending an angry email and I know what I can feel like when I'm angry, if I sent that to my dad, like, I would be absolutely furious. Yeah. So you give yourself a second, you breathe, and then you come back to it. But I do agree, write it out. Don't put their contact details in. Right. Just in case you accidentally send. But you want to write it out as well, because otherwise you have this emotion still inside of you. Yeah. You want to get it out, because otherwise it is going to build up and build up. You want to get it out, and just writing it down, a lot of the time you don't feel as angry once it's written. For me, it works, it works really well, and it helps me to get past it. And I think that would work for anytime I've gotten something that could be scammy, like a phishing email or a phishing call. That, and most of them are lame, but when they come in and I think like, whoa, wait, is that real? I stop to do exactly that. Like, let me think about this for a second before I do anything with this, and that's been successful so far. Not saying I'm perfect, that doesn't happen, but it works well. Well, this was a good topic. I liked it. So whoever suggested this, thank you for suggesting this topic. I thought that this was a very interesting one, and I love the way that you kind of brought up the outline and brought in some of the psychology to it, and then we got a good chance to tie it into practicing as a social engineer. So really, really nice job. I really enjoyed this one. What is next month's I am
topic?
Very excited about next month, because we're going to talk about mimicry, and this is one of my favorite topics on the planet. So
it's going to be fun.
This is going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on our topic of con artists today. Please stay safe for the month, and we'll talk to you next month. See you.